Here is the approach I want you to really pay attention to. So when we talk about Form 1127, here is the form and what it looks like. So basically, this is an application for extension of time for payment of tax due to undue hardship. I'll explain what the term undue hardship means later on, but I want to first walk you through the form here. So you put your first name, last name. You want to put your identifier number. So here, this could be your social or your TIN. So your TIN, your tax identification number. And you put your address, you put your street, city, zip, and state, everything, okay? And so that's the above the line, if you will. And part one here is the request for extension. So here we want to specify the time frame that we are asking the IRS to grant. So here we are asking the IRS to grant us an extension from January 2024 to December 2026 to pay a $10,000 tax debt. So you have to put the amount that you actually owe the IRS and the extension you are asking for. And here you have to put here the tax shown or required to be shown on Form 1040. It could be 1120, it could be 1065, but here for the purposes of this example, we are choosing Form 1040. Okay, and so the IRS wants you on the next line. The IRS wants you to specify the tax year. Again, here we have 2020. So, or you can just put fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020. So your fiscal year could be ending on another date. It could be May 5th. It can be June 30th. It can be September 25th. But here, to make things simple, we are putting December 30th, December 31st, rather, 2020. Okay. Now, here you have to explain the reason for the extension. And we put the death in the family. I'll come back later on when we talk about undue hardship, what it really means. But death in the family is actually a great, quote unquote, a great reason for extension. Okay, so you put that on in part two, and part three, it's pretty straightforward. So here we are speaking about the supporting documentation. So you have to certify a few things. The IRS wants you to make sure that you are telling the truth. So you have to actually certify a few things here. And also, like in terms of a substantiation, the receipts, everything, and then don't forget to sign the form before you mail it. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. Let me talk to you about the pro tips here. So when we talk about undue hardship, I want to explain a little bit what I mean here. So undue hardship, it's really another factor that the IRS may use to actually give you, let's say, a reason for extension. In other words, you are able to pay your taxes within a longer period. In some cases, the IRS uses the undue hardship concept to also abate a tax penalty. Abate means to reduce a tax penalty, okay, or even eliminate the tax penalty or overall. So the IRS defines an undue hardship as something that is more than an inconvenience to the taxpayer. In other words, it has to be really excruciating. It can't be just something like the very light, okay? In reality, when we talk about inconvenience to the taxpayer, we are talking about a level, a standard, if you will, a threshold that's pretty high. This means what? It means the taxpayer must show and document, not just show. You must document some severe financial or personal catastrophe in order to get a tax penalty mitigated or a tax extension as a result of an undue hardship. So this is really important, okay? And this is actually a fairly difficult feat to accomplish if you don't have the proper substantiation, the proper documentation. Now, there are very few circumstances that the IRS will consider severe enough to warrant non-payment of taxes, and that is usually limited to severe detriment to personal health. In other words, you cannot pay medical bills. It can be death in the family, or it can be loss of primary residence. In other words, you cannot pay rent, or detriment to minor children or dependent. You cannot pay their food, housing, or medical expenses. So it's one of those things where you have to be, you can see that the threshold is pretty straightforward and pretty high, okay? And so bearing anything outside of these 2 to 3 factors, the IRS is unlikely to consider your rationale behind an undue hardship sufficient. And it's one of those things where you want to document. Very important. You got to document. Just saying that, I'm having an undue hardship is not going to cut it. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 1127, and I'm explaining to you what this form is all about. Now, let's talk about this form in detail here. I want to dig a little deeper so we have a clear idea what I'm speaking about. I mean, stuff happens, right? Life happens. People go through stuff. Things can be a little complicated. You don't have money, or you have a lot of expenses. So there are situations where you might actually ask the IRS to grant you an extension of time for payment of tax due because of undue hardship. Now, what is the purpose of Form 1127 for real? Now, you have to understand. It's one of those things where Form 1127 gives you an opportunity to delay the payment of taxes if you are facing undue hardship or financial difficulties. I just want to specify the fact that you are delaying the payment of taxes. You are not eliminating the payment of taxes. You still have to pay the tax, okay? And so you basically actually when you actually delay the payment of taxes, you still must file your tax return by the original due date or request a separate extension using Form 4868 for individuals or Form 7004 for businesses if you need more time to complete your tax return. In other words, instead of filing by April 15th, you are actually requesting the IRS grant you to file by October 15th of the year, okay? And Form 1127 is typically used in situations where taxpayers can actually demonstrate that paying the taxes on time would cause significant financial hardship or would be impractical due to circumstances beyond their control. I gave you a few minutes ago some of those circumstances so you have a clear idea what I'm speaking about, okay? It's all about making sure that you are buying time. Because when we talk about the benefits of Form 1127, you have a series of benefits. For example, you have extended payment deadline, so you are able to breathe a little bit, right? You have penalty relief, so you are able to avoid or reduce certain penalties associated with late payment of taxes. That's what I was speaking about earlier when I mentioned the term abatement. You also have additional time to gather funds. If you owe a lot of cash to the IRS and you don't have the cash right now, buying time will actually help you actually get things back in order. You might be able to avoid collection actions in some cases. This is kind of important because the IRS is granting you the extension. So when they do that, they will be able to hold off on initiating enforced collection methods such as liens, levies, or wage garnishments during the extended payment period. And also you have flexibility in payment arrangement. So you are able to actually, again, going back to what I said about breathing, this is kind of important. Let me talk to you about who is eligible. So when we talk about this Form 1127, it's important to have a clear idea about the eligibility criteria because not everybody qualifies. And the IRS has, you can see that when I mentioned earlier, undue hardship, the bar is pretty high. The bar for eligibility is pretty high, and also you have to maintain some documentation. First of all, you have 3 elements. There's a trifecta that the IRS looks at when they evaluate your application for extension through Form 1127. You have undue hardship, you have good faith effort, and you have timely filing. So this is the trifecta. Those are the 3 elements they kind of look at. So when we talk about undue hardship, you must demonstrate that actually paying the tax liability by the due date would cause you or your business undue hardship, right? I've explained this before. That means that you will experience significant financial difficulties or suffer an extreme financial loss if you are required to pay the tax on time. So that's the first criterion. The second criterion here, you have a good faith effort. So you must show that you have made a good faith effort to pay the tax liability. This includes what? It includes exploring all reasonable options to obtain the funds necessary to pay the taxes, such as liquidating assets, borrowing money, or negotiating payment arrangements. And also, when we talk, the third element here is the timely filing. So you must submit Form 1127 before the tax liability is due. So the due date for filing this form is typically the same as the due date for paying the tax, which is usually, as I said earlier, April 15th for individuals or the 15th day of the third month after the end of the tax year for businesses. Okay, so it's one of those things where you want to really show again good faith so that the IRS knows that you've tried everything and you've tried everything humanly possible, and that you can't just pay the tax right now, or paying the tax will actually cause you undue hardship. So if you actually if you meet those three criteria, the IRS is more likely to grant your request for extension. Boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 1127. Let me talk to you about the steps you need to follow here when it comes to this Form 1127. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, if you really think about the threshold for eligibility, everything revolves around the undue hardship that I just mentioned a little earlier, right? But the step by step to actually fill out this form is pretty straightforward. You have to obtain the form itself, so you can go to the IRS website and download the Form 1127, or you can call the IRS at 1-800-829-3676, and they are actually they're reps. They're able to help you, and you have to provide your basic information. And we are speaking about you specifying the type of tax and period covered. So if it's income tax or estate tax or gift tax or business income tax, whatever it is, you have to specify that. Don't forget to explain the reason for the request, right? Everything revolves around undue hardship. As I said earlier, you want to calculate the estimated tax liability, so we have a clear idea what you are asking the IRS to give you an extension on. So we're speaking here also about the requested extension period. So make sure that you actually use the month and year. So in the IRS eyes, everything is cleared. So they need to know exactly what kind of time frame you are requesting here. And don't forget to attach supporting documentation. So we're speaking here about financial statements. You can have medical records in some cases, or any other relevant documents, so that you are able to prove to the agency that you are able to prove undue hardship. Anything you submit to the agency, please don't forget to make copies, okay? Because you still want to keep those for your personal records. And so when everything is done, you sign and date the form. Do not forget to sign and date the form, and then you submit the form. So you can submit the form electronically. You can submit the form via regular mail. If you file via regular mail, you not a problem. And but based on our experience, it's just a lot easier, a lot faster also to file the form electronically. And once you're done, follow up and make sure that you stay on track when it comes to the payment arrangement in case they approve it. One thing I want to say here is that when we talk about the Form 1127, you have to understand that the Form 1127 applies to all kinds of taxes, as I said a little earlier. So you have income tax, individual income tax, estate tax, gift tax, and certain excise taxes if you are in certain business niches. So basically, Form 1127 applies to both individual taxpayers and business taxpayers. And so when we talk about the schedules, you have a series of the schedules depending upon your situation. It could be regular schedule, tax schedules. It could also be financial statements, bank statements, income and expense records, and any other relevant information. It's all about you actually proving to the agency your inability to pay the tax liability. Okay, and when we talk about this form 1127, you're not able to actually get some deductions here. It's not about writing something off. It's about actually applying for an extension to pay. Now, in terms of the deadline, you don't forget everything revolves around what? April 15th. Okay, April 15th. It's the same thing as your form 1040. So the deadline, whatever taxes you have to pay, make sure that you show good faith, right? It's all about showing good faith to the agency by that date, so the IRS knows that you've tried everything and that you just cannot pay right now. And please make sure that you are able to document step by step, document in all granularity your reasonable cause. It's one of those things where when we have seen in our experience for the last 10 years, filing Form 1127 is pretty straightforward. But what's really complicated, I mean not complicated, what's really a little delicate here is to show undue hardship, because undue hardship has there is a correlation between undue hardship and reasonable cause. So you have to be able to actually make that nexus. You have to make that intersection clear to the IRS that, hey, listen, you are having undue hardship and there is a reasonable cause. And then don't forget to actually indicate the length of extension, because if the IRS approves the request, the extension granted on the Form 1127 can provide additional time, usually up to 6 months, and we've seen 12 months in some cases, for you to actually pay the tax liability without incurring penalties. So it's all about you having you asking for an extension that is as reasonable as possible. So when we talk about Form 1127, it's really important to actually keep certain things in mind, right? Don't miss the deadline. So we are speaking here about April 15th. Make sure that the information that you put on the form is complete and accurate. So it's one of those things where you want to double check your entries. So entries, I'm speaking here about your name, your social security number, your address, and the tax period for which the payment is due. And you have to actually explain sufficiently the undue hardship, right? And it's not just about saying it, you have to back it up, right? So we are speaking here about having medical records, financial statements, and or any other relevant evidence that can help you actually convince the IRS that you are really in good faith here. Let me drink some water here. So the bottom line here is what? The bottom line here is that you are able to convince the IRS, but please do not actually ignore correspondence from the IRS. If there is anything outstanding that you have to explain to the agency, then it's really important also to actually keep that in mind. So when it comes to actually filing Form 1127 itself, you can actually file it online. You can file it offline. So you have the ability to file it manually or file it via software. So you can file, or you can actually file it also via one of those IRS e-file providers. So if you don't go through the regular software method, such as with TurboTax or H&R Block or Jackson Hewitt, you are able to file the form actually through an e-file provider that the IRS has partnered with. It's totally possible. So that's not a problem. So bottom line here is when we talk about Form 1127, you have a form that actually offers you flexibility. A form that offers you flexibility, but also extension in terms of breathing time for you to actually gather your thoughts and resources to be able to comply with your tax obligation, to comply with your tax liabilities in some. But again, make sure that you have the proper documents. You're able to back everything up. That you don't make stuff up. That you're able to justify everything if the IRS were to ask for more information. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let me do a quick recap here. So in today's conversation, I spoke to you about Form 1127. So I gave you the approach, the pro tips, the steps, and now the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.